welcome everyone to our pre-commission portion of our meeting today. We'll start with the president's report. Thank you. I just wanted to start off with saying thank you to my fellow commissioners for your engagement, your time. I know that 4 hours out of your day is a lot to commit to for our policy retreat last week, and I just was really heartened by the conversation. I thought it was really productive, and just thank you for your partnership in discussing the various policies that we wanted to look into over the next year. And then I want to extend that to our staff. Thank you so much, team, for being there, for offering your suggestions, clarifying these ideas and thoughts, and being a great team player and partner in this discussion. It was great to have you there, and just really appreciate your guys' knowledge and expertise. We have our joint meeting with the City of Meridian next week, Thursday the 24th at Meridian City Hall. So we'll see you there. And then we have a new joint meeting following up with the City of Boise on March 1st. It's a Wednesday at 9 a.m. here at ACHD. And that's going to be really focused on their Vision Zero plan and efforts there, and it's going to be a collaborative conversation about what they've been doing and how does that correlate or connect with the work that we're doing and how we can be a good partner on that work. And then I wanted to let you know, because the agenda isn't out obviously for next week, isn't available, but I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm actually a professor at Boise State, and I know, no, an adjunct professor. It doesn't mean a whole lot. I know, right? I do actually do, but very little. It's just for, making sure that's not free labor. But a fellow professor reached out, and for the Masters of Public Health program, there's some students in their capstone, which means that they're wrapping up their program, and they wanted to have some time to chat with each of you independently to ask some questions about how you all see the intersection of health and the built environment. So they will be here next week before our meeting gets started as a work session, and each of you we'll have you guys stationed throughout, and there's going to be 5 students total. So they'll have some questions for you, pretty some might be more thought-provoking than others, but it'll be, I think, a good experience for them to hear where you all think health relates to the work and the work that you bring to the commission.
What time was that?
It's before, I don't know exactly what, 11? No, it's an evening meeting. 4 or 4:30 or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then Commissioner Gold and I will be meeting with the YMCA after this meeting today at 2. So I'm just talking about safety along State Street and the intersection of 11th and State. And hear kind of their vision and their ideas. So I don't think we'll go too long today, but if we happen to, we have a hard stop at 1:45, so we can get to that meeting. So any questions or comments from the rest of the commission about any of these items?
No, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Henson. Okay. Oh, Commissioner Goldberg, did you have something?
No, I'll bring you an apple next week, though, Professor.
Okay. All right. So are there any general issues commissioners would like to bring up or schedule for a future discussion? Are there any questions about today's agenda? All right. If not, Director, over to you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning. Stacy, if you could bring up the presentation, please.
I never know if she can.
Well, Commissioners, as you know, every year we compile a jurisdictional report that shows Ada County where we collected dollars and where we spent dollars moving forward. It's that time of the year. I'd like to share that report with you. The intention is, after you've seen this, we'll send it out to the mayors and to Ada County commissioners, and then our communications team is preparing a press release, which we do every year, to share this with the community to ensure maximum transparency for this organization. So that being said, let's start the presentation. And there are multiple slides on how to show this. First one, of course, is a famous pie chart. And I'd like to know, this is where a lot of the revenue, or all the revenue, was generated in FY22. As you can see, a majority of it came from Boise, Meridian, and Ada County. Next slide, please. This shows where the expenditures were by jurisdiction. Majority of it was in Boise and Ada County. Next, please. I like to show the bar charts side by side so that you can see exactly how much and where all of expenditures and revenue was gathered and expended in FY 2021. The blue is the revenue, the red is the expenditures across the board. To the side, you'll see where development impact fees were collected, and below that, you'll see the percentages of property taxes, both commercial and residential, where they were collected from. Below all the bar graphs are the total number of dollars that was collected and were expended. Now, this is for FY22, and as we've said many times before, snapshots are great. Trends are what's important as we move forward in this. Next slide, please. So for the last 5 years, this is where revenue has been generated by jurisdiction. And as you can see, a majority of the revenue came from Boise, Ada County, and Meridian. Next slide, please. Expenditures by jurisdiction, a majority of it, 50% in the last 5 years, went to Boise, with Meridian and Ada County again receiving the other major parts of expenditures here from ACHD. Next slide, please. If you look at this again over time, side by side, these are the bar charts. You can see the total development impact fees that are collected, the total percentages between commercial and residential, and then on the bottom of the bar graphs, we'll show you the total number of dollars that were both collected and expended by jurisdiction. And again, the commission follows where growth is going, and as you can see for the last 5 years, we have expended a majority of the dollars, not majority, I said a lot of dollars into Boise and in Meridian and in Ada County going forward. Next slide, please. Now, going back more years and such, just to ensure we have a good, we look at past operations that the ACHD has done, you can see again that Boise generates the majority of the revenue, followed by Meridian and Ada County. No surprises here. Next slide. And majority of the expenditures over that time frame have been in Boise, Meridian, and Ada County. Next, please. And if you look at again over time, which I think is a good trend show, you'll show that during this time frame, more expenditures were allocated into Boise and such, with a fairly great distribution across all of Ada County, looking at their development plans, those sort of things. Next slide, please. Now projected, again, this is the current integrated 5-year work plan with a sort of like an asterisk on 2027 as we're working through the new area. You can see that projected funding is swinging slightly when it comes down to Boise and Eagle and Garden City and Meridian and unincorporated Ada County. Next slide, please. The jurisdictional split on where things are going, again, from 2022 to 26 is depicted side by side. And as you can see, again, looking forward, there's a fairly good distribution of dollars across all of Ada County based on the integrated 5-year work plan, based on the commission's direction, and based on community programs, all the different funding opportunities and projects that you have the ability to direct and control. Next slide, please. So that in a nutshell is this year's annual report. Again, we wanted you to see this first. I will send this to you electronically when we are done here today. And then our goal is to send these out to, again, mayors and the commissioners at Ada County, and then have our communications team do a press release with Commissioner Pickering after your review on that when we send these out to the entire public. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Commissioners,
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
Director, thank you for that. I'm hoping that we can get it in electronic form so that we can share it as well.
As soon as we're done here, sir, I will have it to all of you electronically.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Hold on one second. Director, it also, I think, would be helpful if we could have, in addition to the graphs electronically, but like the standard deviation, for example. I think like, we've got 11, you cited at 111% for Boise in 1 point, right? So having an average deviation would be an easier data point to track for each city and over time.
Madam President, if I could slightly turn and ask the expert, we'll work on it.
Okay. Okay,
We'll work it.
thank you. Commissioner Hanson.
Madam Chair, yeah, this would be really helpful, and I think we can do this without much difficulty, and that is to identify, especially over the last, I think you picked 14 years, or the really big projects that were completed, because there's some huge ones that have been completed. I know Fairview and Cole was gigantic when we rebuilt the areas around Overland and Cole. So there's been some, so I think it'd be really helpful, because just saying, well, within these city limits, these numbers, but let's take a look at where the big projects are, and that would be really helpful in evaluating them, because I think a lot of those are along the borders, especially between Boise and Meridian and Boise and Eagle.
That's it. Thank
Okay,
you.
Madam President, that's my director's report for today, and you have a couple minutes to enjoy.
Thank you. All right, everyone, it's now 12 p.m. We're going to call the meeting to order. Thanks for everyone being here online and in person. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you so much. All right, so the first order of business is to adopt the agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next order of business is to adopt the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and are action items unless otherwise noted. The consent agenda is enacted by one motion. There is no separate discussion on items on the consent agenda. If a commissioner or citizen would like, they may request any item be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. If there are no such requests, I will entertain a motion.
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Perfect. Okay, moving into the regular agenda. All regular agenda items are commission action items unless noted. The first order of business is the fiscal year 23 first budget adjustment. Christine Tandler.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners. For the record, Christine Tandler, Budget Manager. So I'm here before you for a decision briefing related to the first budget adjustments that were presented last week. The recommendation from staff remains the same, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Christine. Commissioners.
Madam President, I appreciate the clarity on the leading pedestrian indicators and the discussion, how important that is. I also know that we may have a reevaluation of some of those items in time for the next. Doesn't require us to spend the money just because we're reallocating it.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, Madam President, when we say the signalization initiative, we're talking specifically about the leading pedestrian indicators. That's
Correct.
what we're referring to.
Interval,
Okay.
yes.
Right, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Pre-
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
All right, second order of business is the Ustick Northview, Shamrock Avenue, Milwaukee, and Poplar Street, Milwaukee Street, Orchard Street concept adoption. Welcome, Ms. Christy Inselman. Oops.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners. It's a little bit of a mouthful. I agree with that. But it's also a long quarter. So good afternoon. For the record, Christy Inselman, Planning and Programming Supervisor. And as you stated, I'm here today to discuss the adoption of the Ustick Northview and Poplar Street concept studies.
Let me just open the public hearing. So we'll go ahead and do that. Thank you, Christy.
So just staff's recommendation on this concept study is that the commission adopt the Ustick Northview, Shamrock to Milwaukee, and the Poplar Street, Milwaukee to Orchard Street concept studies as presented. Just a reminder of the corridor limits. On the map you see here, the corridor itself is the yellow line that is approximately 5 miles in length. And it starts over on Orchard and it ends at the existing Shamrock Avenue bikeway. The two circles represent the two segments of it. They were two separate bikeways that we combined together and expanded the scope of that to include additional treatment options that I will do an overview of in the next few slides. We went into pretty significant detail when I was here on February 1st. So we have, I don't know why my title's kind of wonky. So in this slide, we're just identifying the corridors that we have as shared facilities. So we have quite a few local streets that are part of this network, and those local streets are low volume, low traffic. They're part of the low stress bikeway. And those would include shared lane markings and signage to identify those as part of the corridor. And those include Montana, Lancelot, Bloomfield, Wesley, Corey, Plymouth, Mountain View, Fowler, and Bond. We also heard from the public that there were several segments along the corridor that they wanted us to address additional traffic calming elements. And those were Corey, Poplar, Plymouth, Mountain View, Fowler, and Bond. And those treatment types could include some of our traffic calming elements, so traffic circles, bulb outs, and speed cushions. We also, when we expanded the scope of this, we included some segments where we can fill in those sidewalk gaps along the corridor where they don't exist today, or to complete where we didn't have them. So those include Wesley Drive. This segment here shown on the map, there's no sidewalk on either side. So the recommendation is to include sidewalk on both sides of this local street. Also on Poplar Street, which is probably the longest segment of this corridor as far as one particular roadway, we are proposing them on the south side. Those two maps along the bottom, you see that the sidewalk is only proposed on the south. This is an outdated aerial map. We do have sidewalk already existing on the north side of the roadway, so we would be proposing to complete that on this corridor. And then for the map kind of in the middle, where it's got the nice little turn, we are only proposing sidewalk on the south side. This particular stretch of Poplar Street is extremely narrow, and the public was very supportive of doing some improvements, but they preferred just one side because it is extremely narrow. And over the next few slides, I will go through the different intersection transitions. We have multiple along some arterial and collector roadways, and these would be for the corridor to get the cyclists and the pedestrians across those heavier volume roadways in a safer manner. So on this slide, we're showing the treatments for 5 Mile Road crossing. As you recall, that's right next to Combo Park. It's at Combo Park in Lancelot. And we're proposing pedestrian hybrid beacon with raised median, refuge island, and curb bulb outs. So they would transition from Lancelot via a shared facility to crossover. And on Maple Grove, on Maple Grove in Milwaukee, we have similar treatment types where we would actually have we would increase that and do buffered multi-use pathway to consolidate the southbound bike lanes, as well as some curb bulb outs. And then these are additional, intersection treatments. So at Cole Road, we have that crossing there, Wesley to the west and Poplar to the east. We'd be adding an additional crossing, which would be a pedestrian hybrid beacon and curb bulb outs. At Curtis Road intersection, it would be a combined bike ped crossing with curb bulb outs. And Fisk and Poplar was a very interesting intersection in its configuration, where you had a lot of traffic kind of cutting and not actually stopping at that intersection. And where there's also a school access just south on Fisk and access to the Kelsch Elementary there. So the recommendation was to do a raised crossing at that location. And again, this is where we're doing the sidewalk. And I did want to note that the crossings that we're showing in all of these areas, these are additional crossings to our network. We are not proposing as part of this concept to relocate or remove any existing crossings that are currently on our network. And then I wanted to just touch on a couple of the segments that have, that are a little bit higher volume roads, but we're doing some specialized treatment on these. So Mitchell Street is one of those. And it's where we're taking people along the corridor. They would come from Lancelot and go south and then transition over to Corey Lane. So on this one, the top map shows where the limits are of that treatment. We're also doing a unique treatment type, and those are called jug handles. And this gives them some opportunities as a cyclist to get out of the lane of travel and be able to visually see better to cross the street. And we're also proposing to remove parking so that we can have buffered bike lanes on both sides. So it would be a 5 to 6 foot bike lane with a 2 foot buffer painted buffer. And we did update the study on the webpage. So after our pre-adoption hearing with you guys, there were a few items that you asked to be added as additional considerations, and those have been added to the report. And so potential vertical elements along these corridors were also added. And then Northview Street, again, this is a unique treatment type. We were, our goal was to utilize the existing infrastructure on the street. There's a lot of front-on housing along this side. We did some traffic or parking analysis along this corridor, and there was parking utilized, but not significantly utilized. And so our recommendation would be to remove parking from one side of the street, retain at least one side, and then alternate where that parking would occur, which also then creates a chicane effect. And we did identify the parking locations on this map here, and that was in response to our parking analysis showed where people were actually parking today. So we wanted to retain as much of that as possible. So the street section you see here below, it shows a parking lane. Currently, the treatment type on this segment is shared facilities with signage. So we would replace that with actual dedicated bike lanes. So we would have that on both sides. You'll see that one is proposed to be 6 foot and the other is proposed to be 4. The reason why those are not both 5 is when we have the bike lane adjacent to the parking lane, it gives them that door ding buffer. And we felt that was more important for safety, from a safety perspective. And then the cost estimate for this project, as a reminder, this project is 5 miles in length, the entire segment, a very long segment. So the cost estimate is approximately $4.2 million. We have both of these projects are currently in the integrated 5-year work plan for design to begin in 25, right-of-way acquisition where we potentially might need it in 26, and then we would identify a construction year, hopefully at the next update that we do for you. So to just circle back around, staff is recommending that you adopt the concept studies as presented, and I will stand for any questions.
Madam President?
Thank you, Christy. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes, I know we have a representative from the Boise School District here today. So I just wanted to let it known that the reason we put together these concept studies and these types of projects, one of the reasons is to make it easier for parents to allow their kids and feel that their kids will be perfectly safe walking or biking to school. And we're willing to put millions of dollars into that instead of perhaps tens of millions of dollars along the same areas to completely redo roads. So we hope it works. It'll take a few years, but this is $4 million, I believe, well spent.
Thanks, Commissioner Goldthorpe. Christy, I have a couple questions. Do you mind going back to your slides? Is that possible, Ken? Thank you. I was just wondering, because looking at the public comments that we received for the integrated 5-year work plan, folks aptly requested for some speed bumps along Northview. And that got me thinking too, is how come speed humps or speed bumps weren't considered along Northview in addition to the chicanes and maintaining some of that parking in the bike lane?
Yeah, we had a couple different treatment. Let me see if I can. Oh, am I going the wrong way? I can't move the slides.
Maybe it's not sharing correctly.
Apparently. Okay. So this one we are proposing, so the bike lanes, and we are proposing some elements for traffic calming. So there are some bulb outs that we're proposing, and the chicane itself is also a traffic calming. This particular segment had lower volumes than if you continue east.
True.
It significantly increases.
So.
That will be a future concept study to look at that particular corridor.
Okay.
But along here, and we actually didn't get requests from the public for this segment to get a lot of traffic calming.
So you're thinking it's more from Milwaukee to Cole and Milwaukee to Curtis. Okay.
And we did get those comments. So like, the problem is over here. So we're like, yeah, we get it. We actually are going to do a concept study on that segment.
Perfect. Thank you. And then another question is, and then moving on to the Cole and Poplar intersection. So was the raised intersection a treatment that was what you presented last time, or
Yeah.
was, okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
if
the
that was
raised
that.
intersection is the Fisk and Poplar is the raised intersection. The Cole Road crossing at Poplar is a PHB with curb bulb outs.
Okay. Is there a reason why that was the, like that type of pedestrian, crosswalk versus a fully signalized intersection? Is there a reason why we didn't want to go fully signalized?
It didn't meet the signal warrants. Sorry, Madam President. It did not meet the signal warrants for a full signalized intersection at this location.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioners, any other questions for Christie?
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Christie, could we go back to the page showing Northview? There we go. Last week or the week before, after our meeting and discussion, we got comments from a resident or two on Bloomfield Drive, concerned about cut-through traffic. This project will, aside from bulb outs there at the Northview and Bloomfield intersection, this project won't have any other effect on Bloomfield. Any consideration of that would be a separate thing, is that correct?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney. So Bloomfield is part of this corridor. We actually heard from quite a few cyclists that use, I had quite a few, they're like, we use this exact east-west corridor. We're so glad that you're adding elements to make this safer. And almost all of them said that they use Bloomfield instead of the intersection at Northview and Milwaukee, because it's this nice little local street, it's very low volume. So our treatments that we are recommending for Bloomfield, there are bulb outs at the Northview entrance. There's also bulb outs at the Milwaukee entrance. So we would be necking down both of those locations. But we did not consider additional traffic calming elements on that corridor because we didn't hear through the different public outreaches. I did see that letter, but that's the first we had heard that there was any concerns on that particular stretch.
So there hasn't been a consideration of basically cutting Bloomfield and making it non-continuous for vehicular traffic?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, we did not consider that as part of this concept study, but
Okay.
if there's additional things that the commission would like us to consider as we go into the design phase of it, I'm more than happy to add that.
Okay, I don't know if you can answer this question, but what's the maximum length of dead-end street that's allowable? If Bloomfield were simply to be cut, would it qualify for that kind of treatment? Because it doesn't look like there's room to put a cul-de-sac at each end.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, Bloomfield, I believe with the fire department, it cannot exceed 150 feet, and I can have somebody clarify if they know that answer,
It looks like
for it
it's-
to be a cul-de-sac. But Bloomfield isn't by itself. There's actually a local street that ties into Bloomfield that goes south. So even if we cut that off, there would still be other access to the internal local street network, and then also out to Milwaukee and also out to Northview.
Okay, well, it does sound like based on public input that's something on Bloomfield needs to be considered in whatever way. Okay, other question then, on to the cost of this project. Does that, the estimated 4.2 million, does that include right-of-way and design and construction?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, yes, that's all phases of the project.
Okay. Well, let me just conclude. I want to make a comment about this and other bikeway projects that we've been considering lately. I think it's worth considering that these are great and make, absolutely are improvements to our bicycle and pedestrian facilities. But I think I have to comment that the idea that these sorts of projects will have a significant effect on traffic congestion I think is a misguided notion. I don't think, we have to recognize that if bicycle and pedestrian traffic increased by tenfold because of this project, that would still have very little impact on traffic congestion in the area. So we've got to recognize that these sorts of projects, regardless of their merits, aren't really congestion relief projects. So we've got to keep them in that frame of mind. Thanks.
Thanks.
Commissioner Hanson?
Madam President, thanks. Thanks, Christie. I love that you do now just a standard parking analysis on, is this stuff used? Let's not waste it if it's not being used. And what's another better public purpose for it? So I really love the parking analysis. Thanks. When you talk about adding some of the vertical elements that we discussed at the work session, Are you talking about, sort of like hard vertical elements, or, cause candles really don't work, or temporary ones? I know we're also looking at that on Rose Hill, so, I was just, it struck me as, I'm so glad there's a vertical element on Main Street as we approach the bridge on Main Street. Cause I was driving over it on Tuesday morning and there were cars going like this. And, but people who were walking on it were protected by, maybe one day they'll look better, but ultimately that protected them really well, cause it was a hard vertical barrier of what is it, like 3 feet or something? So are those the kind of things you're looking at? And is it, is this project gonna try out some temporary ones just to make sure we get it right before we spend the money on a permanent? So those are 2 questions.
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, we added that under additional considerations and we left it pretty open. We didn't specify what type of treatment we would look to do. That is something that, again, we'd look at through design. And I think all of you guys are aware of our delineator study that we're working on to see what treatment types may be better suited for this element or this area or region. So I think that's going to tell us a lot about what we potentially could do as far as vertical elements. I mean, on several of the transitions, we are taking them out of the roadway entirely. So that provides a bit of a physical barrier, the curb line and everything, but we have not identified which type, but we did leave some room for what we potentially could do.
A good vertical element, thanks. And then I just add that, you know, this is going to help the neighborhood and help people move around safely. I think the goal was LTS1 as much as possible. There's a couple places where it's going to be really tough, but LTS2, but no worse than LTS2 is for the entire corridor. Is that?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, that's correct.
Yeah.
The majority of the corridor will drop down to an LTS1 if it's not existing at LTS1, and other areas it will not go higher than a 2.
Yeah, and what's happened is, you know, since the Leadville Bikeway and there's other examples, the value of living in those neighborhoods has been enhanced because you have options to go to places, cycle and walk safely. And so it really does add to the economic value. I know we don't sort of measure economic return on this, but it does add to the value. And so one can assume those, if someone was going to make those trips, otherwise it would have been by car, and it's not by car. So there's all these elements that add to this kind of investment that the data's there to show that it does return tremendous value, not just on potential congestion mitigation, but on the value to the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Hanson. Any other questions? Commissioner Gold.
Thanks, Madam President. So I just want to reiterate my support for the widening of the sidewalks on Northview and the separated bike paths, and I know that that's been included in the other comments, so thank you for that. And agree with the point about traffic calming on Bloomfield, that you know, we've heard that from the neighbors. Also wondering if we could look at bulb outs as recommended by the PAG recently, the policy document that we had gotten from them. Mm-hmm. So kind of look at bulb outs in this project aligned with their recommendations.
Christy, do you want to?
Madam President, Commissioner Gold, I've not seen that document, so okay. I'm not sure what their recommendations are.
Okay, we'll make sure.
I know that we have multiple locations throughout that we're proposing bulb outs and where we think are appropriate and safe. The current cost estimate does not include any additional bulb outs, but I'm happy to look at the document that you're referencing.
Yeah, we'll make sure that happens.
Madam President.
Commissioner McKinney.
Can I make just one more comment, and this is just kind of for future reference. The one thing that that we need to keep in mind, I guess, and I know staff is aware of this, but I just wanted to emphasize it. When we do, excuse me, when we do bulb outs are notoriously susceptible to snowplow damage. And I know, for example, years ago, when I was working as an engineer, we did a redesign of a street, a main street in a different city in Idaho, and we put bulb outs in, and within the next year we got calls from the mayor saying, hey, your project is falling apart because all the bulb outs were getting hit by snowplows. And I hope, I don't know what we do here at ACHD to try to prevent that, but it would be very sad if we spent a lot of money building bulb outs for these sorts of projects, and then within a couple of years they're all ripped to shreds because snowplows hit them, not seeing them, and so on. Anyway, just a kind of a cautionary thought that we should sort of put in the back of our minds. Thank you.
Well, just in response to that, I know our teams do a fantastic job navigating around all kinds of obstacles, and that's a pretty standard treatment here in Ada County. So I don't see that being something to negate that type of treatment. So,
Madam President?
hold on, so I think Commissioner Hanson, one brief question.
Actually, every time I drive by Highland and Leadville, that's the Leadville Bikeway, those are curb extensions on all four corners into both streets. They've survived very well. The snowplows have never hit them. And it also provides that kind of traffic calming on Highland as well as on Leadville. And Leadville's a share-o, so you have to share that with the drivers. And they've worked very well. So I always smile when I go by Leadville and Highland, that intersection. It's like, that's the model. Let's make that the model for as many places as possible. I'm sure you're familiar with it because you were involved with Leadville Bikeway, and it really works.
Commissioner Goldberg, do you have a question about the project?
Not a question, but a comment like what you made, and it has to do with evidence of the expertise of our team, our winter maintenance team, on navigating anything and everything that we have during the winter in the right-of-way. I would ask if we can find it, I can probably find it myself, the picture that a citizen in, I believe it was Jim's neighborhood, sent us during Snowmageddon when one of our plows was navigating around all these parked vehicles and other obstacles, and she was absolutely dumbfounded at the expertise that our people showed. We need to remember they are actually world champions at this, bring home first place trophies, and nationwide, and so I think we can have confidence that they can get that job done.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldthorpe. All right, so if there's no other questions, we're going to turn over to public comment. Stacy?
Yes, Lisa Brady.
Welcome, Lisa. She's here.
I'll scoot over there.
Please, I know you're used to this, but please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Lisa Brady. My address is 1506 North 12th Street, Boise, Idaho 83702. Today I am here in front of you representing the Treasure Valley Safe Routes to School program and wanting to comment on the Poplar U-Stick Bikeway. So thank you, Chairwoman Pickering. So I also serve at your pleasure on the Bicycle Advisory Committee. We have seen this project and we've ridden the project, and I've had opportunity to talk to Christy about this as well. In looking at the renderings and having worked at Fairmont Junior High just on Monday, I have some concerns. And they have to do with the crossing, particularly at Cole and Poplar. We have a full signal head for the pedestrian movements coming out of the junior high there. And if you're familiar with junior high school students, we don't always make the best decisions when we're at that age. So we have to give them as much protection as possible. We're encouraging them to use the buttons and all of that. A full signal head is protected until that light turns green. A pedestrian hybrid beacon has a walk sign until those lights start to flash and the countdown timer goes on. Students of that age go on a countdown timer. And we know that the delay for them and for many people is unacceptable for whatever reason, but I am deeply concerned that we don't have full signal head there. I don't know about the warrants, and I know that there are several signals right in line right there. I don't have the best recommendation at this point other than it being a full signal head at that crossing at Cole and Poplar, just to keep the students safe. On Northview, I rode that section on Monday. I remain concerned about Northview and the shifting of the parking. and rolled curb. I did not view the curbing in the section past Milwaukee to the west, but the rolled curb is encouraging parking on the sidewalk. And when we have alternating bike lane and Sharrow back and forth, it only encourages at this point people parking on the sidewalk. And student reports from Monday are that they have a hard time navigating this area. We have Fairmont Park there that's open all summer with ball fields, a pool. We have church there. We have Morley Nelson Elementary, St. Michael's School. I think it's St. Michael's, St. Teresa? I can't remember. And Fairmont Junior High. For Safe Routes to School is not only just school, it's parks and services and work. And in this case, I think that we need to take a big look at that particular zone to make sure it's the safest possible for the students. Onward throughout the whole entire project, my concern with biking is that we're putting bikers in a front-on position when they're crossing the roads, and I'm at my 3 minutes, I think, right now. We're putting people into a head-on position when we have them accessing a multi-use path that brings them back across the roads. Examples are Maple Grove and Corey Lane, a 5-mile crossing. We're using one single crossing, which is very similar to Pleasanton at Whitewater Park, where on a everyday basis I ride that. And my worst part of that is crossing over to access the crossing, which is putting me in a head-on position with motor vehicle traffic turning right. When we're in these zones, when we have people moving in an unpredictable manner, they're not thinking about what's coming behind them in turning traffic. They're coming off of a bikeway and looking, I'm going forward, am I looking for the driver that's coming around the corner? And so I just want to put that on the record that we don't recommend that bikes ride against traffic ever, but we're putting them in this position on this project. I like this project, no question. There's missing sidewalk. There is a need for better connectivity all through that whole project. But what can we do to make sure that people aren't on the wrong side? And that is all I have to say.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Next, we have a Becky Walker on Zoom.
Hi, my name is Becky Walker. I live at 10827 West Ustick Road. And a lot of what I feel, I echo Lisa Brady's sentiments. I live almost right at the corner of Ustick and 5 Mile, and there are just many things about that crossing in general that concern me. I am often on the Shamrock Bath Pikeway. I commuted from Ustick to the north end for over 8 years, and there's a lot of connectivity problems with that area. When I read about this project, I was so excited because we need it, but I just have a lot of concerns also. This is not a pathway that I could use to get to things that I want to utilize that are just 1.5 miles down the road from my house. DELSA's, my library, and I really wish that we could have had like a VTR come in, because I just feel like if this project's approved and we go that route, we could have made it better with utilizing the different bus routes that are along those streets to help that navigation. So I love the idea of more sidewalks and buffered bike lanes, but I'd like to see a multi-use pathway down Ustick. I'd like to see easier routes where we're not having to feel like I'm switching back. I've seen so many accidents at Ustick and 5 Mile. And that new pedestrian crossing, I just feel like is going to be like the pedestrian crossing in front of my apartment, where it just gets hit and nobody stops. And I just have a lot of concerns. I want bike infrastructure. I want alternative transportation, but I want it safely. And I just appreciate the time and energy that the commissioners and everyone else has put in, but I just cannot agree with this project. I use these roads every day, and I feel safer going down 5 Mile to Emerald than I think I would switching back and using the crossings. Maybe it's just because I'm used to it, but I just wouldn't feel comfortable. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Walker.
The next person to testify, and please accept my apologies in advance, but Yevgeny Krepsov.
Hi, thank you for opportunity to comment.
Can you state your
I
name and
wanna.
address for the record, please,
Oh
before
yeah,
we get
my name is
started?
Evgeny Kravtsov. I live on 3800 North Jekyll Lane, which is near Eustic and Maple Grove. I wanted to overall support the project, and I've read through the report and read through the public comments. Some people complained or asked why do we need this project versus say improving Northview and things like that. And I would say that uh, as a relatively stress tolerant bicyclist, I can travel all kinds of roads. It's not really a problem for me per se. But if I'm say traveling with my child, with our child, and I'd rather take a back route sometimes, and and I prefer this kind of low stress, opportunities and options. And also depends destinations where I'm going. If I'm taking some routes to Greenbelt, I take through Maple Grove down across Garden City. Some I go through this Poplar route. So I appreciate any sort of improvements, especially if it helps kids get safer to schools. I have some comments on particulars. Going east to, I'll try to be brief, going east to west. Uh, Curtis Road crossing, saw the traffic that goes northbound on Curtis. I didn't see that you decreased the turning radius, because I think when the pedestrians and bicyclists are crossing the street and they merge into that from the sidewalk back onto the street, if the traffic going northbound doesn't slow down, turning right, there's just a dangerous conflict can happen there. So I think the cars need to be slowed down on that turn, turning east from Curtis. Second question is about the school access on Colch Elementary. I was wondering, was it ever considered to make a like multi-use path along that school access to straighten out that path, like they did in say 11th Street Bikeway? Um, they were just interested if it was ever even considered, or or it's something to do with the school district that wouldn't allow that. Other things I wanted to comment on the Milwaukee and Maple Grove multi-use paths. I think it's a good idea at this point. I've seen some people comment saying that, it creates confusion, or they would prefer to stay on the street. Which, if I'm biking alone and the street is empty, I would also stay on the street and use turning lane, for instance, from Maple Grove to Northview, like I normally do right now. But I think at this point, safety for comfortable road users is more important, and we can deal with those little conflicts right now, because it's a great problem to have when we have so much bicycle and pedestrian traffic that we're going to start having conflicts on those in those areas. Right now, I think safety is more important. And I would also like, you already talked about vertical treatments, and I think there's a federal guidelines for this type of things too. So I don't know if we can do like a raised higher curbs and maybe landscape buffering in those areas, to protect the multi-use pathways from those major streets. And the last comment I wanted to do about the north view between Maple Grove and Bloomfield or Milwaukee. I'm thinking, if we're already doing bike lanes and buffer bike lanes, why can't we put the bike lane behind the parking? So we don't have to worry about the dooring issue, and just keep it's at this point it's just mostly paint anyway. So why can't we paint the bike lane next to the curb and separate bike lane with parked cars? But that's probably all my comments, and I appreciate the opportunity again, and thank you for the project overall supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions. I want to offer, Christy, could you respond about the pathway question around Kelch? Because I'm not quite sure what he's referring to. So could you explain why that wasn't considered?
Yeah, Madam President, thank you. So Kelch Elementary has an access. There's a pathway through the backside of their school, and it connects to Fisk. And that's where we're actually taking the sidewalk to that access point. We did reach out multiple times, and I did have a conversation with the school district, and they weren't supportive. It's an elementary school, So it's a little bit different of a circumstance, I think, for safety concerns for the school versus we're taking through a high school. So they weren't supportive because trying to get that pathway all the way through and kind of take them off Poplar and go through there, we did consider it as a project team, and we did reach out to the school and have those conversations, but they weren't supportive of that. That's what he's referring to, I believe.
Okay, thank you. And then he asked another question about the, removing the bike lane on Northview from the area where on the left side of parking, but put it next to the sidewalk. Was that a consideration as well?
Madam President, I don't believe that we considered it. The width of it, it would not remove the concerns of the door dings, because then you still would have them not as frequently, likely, unless there's a passenger they're getting out. We didn't consider that as one of as a part of the concept, but we can consider that in design if the commission would like me to.
Okay, thank you, Christy.
We have Mr. Don Kostlik.
Hey, commissioners, thank you. Don Kostlik, 1623 South Division in Boise. Thank you, Commissioner Goldthorpe. We use those ACHD videos in a lot of our walkability trainings on the snowplow thing, because if we can drop a golf ball into a traffic cone, we can get around those. But also, Sandpoint has a lot of snow, a lot of curb extensions. They put a cast iron lip on the top of their curbing to prevent it from getting damaged. So there are a lot of treatments out there to address those issues if it's a concern. I want to back up what Lisa Brady said on the issue of bringing bicyclists off of a sidewalk, crossing traffic, and in a contraflow riding against traffic. Even ACHD's bike map at the top to bicyclists says, be predictable. And that design is making them unpredictable where those situations are being asked of. So I think in the final design, there's a need to look at those things. A couple other things that I think is just, again, like I testified for Capitol Boulevard, there's so much good stuff in this, and kudos, Christy, Tom Walls, and Meg McCarthy did a great job with the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I joined them, I want to say last spring or so, of riding this corridor, and a lot of the things we discussed on that are incorporated here. On your overall low-stress bikeways, we need to look at connections to the places people are actually going, and that means grocery stores and libraries and other destinations on arterials like Fairview and Eustic. Because if we are going to give people the freedom to decide to travel by a mode other than a motor vehicle, we have to make those connections. Otherwise, these just become recreational low-stress routes and don't really serve a function in the transportation system. So I hope future ones can look at connections to get these low-stress bikeways to the destinations, because people who walk and bike want to get to the same places that motorists do. On the signal warrant side, I agree with Lisa, but I also understand the constraint on warrants. I guess I'm confused because I listened in on the State Street discussion last week, and I think you guys were told that you could request full signals at some of those intersections, even though they didn't meet warrants, as a way to expedite the process. So I just hope that there's some clarity on that. Are warrants that sacred, or are they indeed flexible? And that's something only others can answer. And finally, just on the vertical elements, I think my concern is where you have like a 3-foot buffer on Maple Grove, you need a vertical element there. That is clear in AASHTO across the board, and that's adopted in your policy manual. And you have a Jersey barrier separating the roadway from a pathway. As you leave ACHD today, go up to Adams, turn right on Veterans, and you will see the vertical Jersey barrier separating the road from the pathway. And I think a treatment or something like that is what most of us are looking for. You will often hear that because we have bigger vehicles in Idaho, we can't do 10-foot lanes. Well, if we have bigger vehicles in Idaho, it would only stand to reason that we need more of that protection. So if it's good for lane widths, it should also be used to justify better protection for people walking and biking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kostlik.
We have one more, Mr. Brian Stelbotsky.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Stelbatsky. My address is 2220 North Fry Street, 83704. Right in between Northview and Poplar. I've been a resident of the area about 4 years now. I'm an almost full-time bike commuter whose commute takes me right down this corridor to Orchard, where I drop down and connect to the Greenbelt to finish my commute. So I've been excited to watch this project. I really support this sort of multimodal transportation. I appreciate the attention to this. I had two specific comments on the intersection of Plymouth and Curtis in this project. The first, one of the big deficiencies, I think, of that intersection as a bicyclist or pedestrian has been the responsiveness of the pedestrian crossing request button, which, especially at peak traffic times, is significantly slow. Having traveled this route multiple times daily over the past few years, I've watched numerous bicyclists, pedestrians make decisions that are probably risky with traffic, particularly at peak times, myself being one of those at certain points. And I feel that the speeding up the responsiveness of the button there would aid the crossing of Curtis while you're on Plymouth. The other point relates to some of the other comments about forcing bicyclists into traffic. As designed now, when you're headed east, I suppose, on Plymouth crossing Curtis, you are on the sidewalk to access the button. You cross the crosswalk, which puts you back onto the sidewalk, which if you're continuing onto Plymouth, then forces you back onto the street to cross over opposing traffic to rejoin the bikeway or the bike path on the road. I don't know that this plan addresses that necessarily. And so one potential shortcoming that I see there, forcing bicyclists across traffic when that sidewalk does end. Thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to comment.
Thank you.
That is all I have signed up. If there was anybody else in the audience.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. Christy, did you have any other comments based off of the feedback or any questions you want to clarify?
Madam President, I don't.
Okay.
Unless the commission has any for me.
All right. We're going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
I'll just follow up on a couple questions that were raised. I thought they were really good points. I also recognize that this is probably the most complicated area we've ever tried to put a pedestrian way to make it work safely at LTS 1, 2, than any of them I've seen so far. It's like Leadville was a cakewalk compared to this. How will we use some of this input? So there's significant input. Obviously, it is problematic, the notion of driver expectation and pedestrian and bicycle expectation when you're going with traffic at one point and then you have to switch and now you're going against. How do we make sure everybody's expectations are changed and addressed at that location?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, my response to that would be that we definitely listen to the public and what those concerns are. And when we get to that design phase, we would have that additional information that they've provided, and we can look at through design, through markings, through signage, through, do we need to tweak this potentially a little bit to make that expectation a little bit more obvious? We can get into that more minutia at that level. But we absolutely these comments would be shared with the project team and with the consultant, whoever's going to engineer the project.
Good. I know on Rosehill, there's a couple things we're not too sure about, so we can use some temporary installations. Is this conducive to using some of those so that we can sort of test things out before we put it in concrete?
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, potentially. Yeah. I mean, those, the multi-use pathways that we have on some of those transitions, there are buffers built into that, and then the treatment that we could potentially do within that buffer. I believe both of them have between a 5 and 6 foot buffer between the multi-use path and the roadway. So we can look at some treatment options there as well during design.
So that'd be great if we could. Ms. Walker raised the issue of being able to get to various destinations, DELSA's in the school and a couple of others. And I know as you were collecting tons of information from people, you now know where people want to go in each of those neighborhoods. They're not going to, probably only a minority are going to do the entire length to commute from one end to the other. Is there a follow-up for especially the integrated 5-year work plan to say, here's an area, I'll just use DELSA's as an example. There's a whole bunch of people who'd like to get there safely, but there's this little gap. So we can help bring them to this point. So is there like a set of, let's prioritize these pieces over here. There's a school, a park, a destination along that corridor that if we could just put those into the plan, not this plan necessarily, but into the integrated 5-year work plan, this information is tremendously valuable.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, absolutely. We, this is, I always like to say, we're trying to give bikes and peds the vast array of ways to get to and from different destinations. And this is just one of many that connect and will connect to a broader network as we get those completed. Like this one will connect to Shamrock that's existing today, that gives some options. Both of those roadways, Ustick and 5 Mile, those are completed and have bike facilities on them today. They have bike lanes. They do not have a multi-use, you are correct. No. That is something we can evaluate, but other corridors, we did hear, there were some comments from the public of, you should be looking at Northview, not here. And we don't typically look at it that way because we are going to look at Northview. We are going to look at that also being a corridor to improve for those that bike and walk. But then here's another one. So we're working as quickly as we can to build out that network and provide additional options to those attractors for sure.
Yeah, because I know from Leadville, there's now projects that people are saying, I want to get to Leadville a little safer. And so, and the same thing on the other side of Broadway. The last question has to do with this whole notion of warrants and signal timing. And I know that sometimes we have this thing where, well, if we anticipate the growth of development, especially if density goes in, there might be a warrant for a better signal, whatever higher level signal at some point. And I know we've done this when we've said, well, we're going to build a single lane roundabout, but we're going to eventually build it out to double. And there's been like, well, why not save us the cost of tearing it up and replacing it and putting in, just build it now. Is that consideration, especially since lighting, traffic lights are, to go in and replace it all from RRFB to a PHB to a full signal. I don't know what the costs to move up to each of those are, whether it's like, well, maybe it doesn't quite meet warrants now, but this might be justified. And can we write that into it to say this would be the cost of if we went in and actually went to the next level, anticipating, all it would take is X density to get us there anyway.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, if the commission would like us to add that as an additional consideration under the design phase, for that from a PHB to a signal, I'm more than happy to add it.
I think that'd be great, especially since we can actually synchronize the signals and that, as Lisa indicated, the expectation of both and we just need to know the instrumental cost to move from one to the other. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, I had one. I just realized.
Another one.
Rolled curbs.
Yes.
I know we're going to get rid of them on, we try and get rid of them on lots of places. We're going to get rid of them on Collister, except for driveways. Is that, or are we going to, I didn't notice that. Perhaps you already said that. Are we going to get rid of some of the rolled curbs, which does the exact thing that Mr. Krastoff said, people just encouraged to park on the parking?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, the recommendation is to utilize the existing infrastructure, but when I came on the first, we did add that to additional considerations to reevaluate reconstructing the entire roadway. And we did some very initial cost estimating on what that would be. And if we did reconstruct the full roadway, the curb line would be redone at that time.
Yeah, that would be good. I know as it's too bad we allowed rolled curbs to be put in years and years ago, but that was before you and I were around.
Okay, that was your last one, Commissioner Hanson?
That was my last one.
Officially? Okay.
Good
Well,
testimony.
Christy, I just want to, I want to say thank you to everyone that showed up and virtually or in person to testify. You all brought up some excellent points. I do want to say, yeah, the rolled curb on Northview and in that entire subdivision area is a massive problem. And Mr. Stabotsky, someone that also lived on Fry Street, I really appreciate you testifying too. And yeah, it's a massive problem with folks parking on the sidewalks. And yeah, I think that definitely needs to be a hard thing moving forward that we can redo or remove, because that's an essential piece of making sure that this infrastructure is used, and that could get in the way of that. I also would agree that the signal, we should really deeply consider moving away from the PHB to a fully signalized intersection on Cole and Poplar, in part because it is dangerous for cars and I mean all users really to get around that intersection. It's 4 lanes, 2 lanes each way, turning left or right can be really challenging depending on the time of day, and then adding the pedestrian, even with it being raced, can be really challenging, or I'm assuming would be really challenging. So I would really agree with that being a consideration moving forward. Yes. So any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Madam
Commissioner
President.
Gold.
Yeah, thank you. I would agree with the light, adding that to the list of other considerations. And the parking protected bike lane that was recommended by a resident on Northview may help address that rolled curb concern too.
Thanks, Commissioner Gold. Commissioner Gold, you good?
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
can I just weigh in with another comment? As far as the signal is concerned, I think I've been involved in signal warrant analysis myself as an engineer, and the criteria that are involved in the analysis that goes into that are, it's a matter of taking perfectly rational and fact-based analysis to decide, does it make sense? Is it warranted to put a signal here? And although of course the final peg of the signal warrant was sort of the political warrant, that is that, bodies like us who can say, yeah, put one in, can do that. But I would be hesitant to say, yeah, let's put in a signal here, because every signal is an impediment to traffic. And you only put them in when having the signal is better than not having it. And I think that it's a fair question here whether, the pedestrian beacon works very well in many places. And if this intersection and the idea that Commissioner Hanson has suggested that population density in this area might increase dramatically, I don't think that's likely. I think this area is pretty much built out. So traffic volumes may increase to the point where it is warranted, but if they're not warranted, and if it's not, if it's a close question, that's one thing. But if it's pretty clear that it's not warranted, I don't think we should just jump up and say, oh yes, let's put it in, when we have other means to address the concerns about pedestrian safety. So I would not necessarily push for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner McKinney. As someone that this is my district and I live in this neighborhood, and as, to your point, I don't think anyone is arbitrarily suggesting that we put fully signalized intersections wherever we want or feel like is convenient. I think the concerns that were brought up today by folks that testified, as well as someone that drives or has been scared to bike through that intersection, that intersection does not, it might move cars efficiently through the intersection, but in terms of people trying to use it to turn left if they're going north or south on Cole is extremely dangerous because how fast, and having to cross 2 lanes of traffic. So I think the whole signalized conversation isn't just about pedestrians and bicyclists. It's also about supporting the movement of those cars, given how complex and fast moving it is. So just for your consideration on that. So is there any other comments, or we've got it for us? Is there a motion?
Sure. Madam President, I would move that we adopt the long-named concept study. Is there a second?
Madam President, I'll second that as long as it includes the comments that Commission has made.
Sure.
The concerns at the design phase, which I think they will. So I'll second that with the understanding it will include the concerns raised by the Commission.
Specifically to the signal at Cole and Poplar.
Signal, parking protected bike lanes, vertical elements.
Rolled curb, okay.
Rolled curbs.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Goldthorpe. Thanks, Commissioner Hess. This is moved and seconded. Any discussion? I just want to say thank you, Christy. Thank you, staff, and thanks again to the public for weighing in. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thanks, Christy. Thanks, Commission. Okay. The third item of business is the vacation of public right-of-way for Madrone Village subdivision, Arroyo Indio Farm LLC. This item was deferred from January 11th when the public hearing was opened. Staff requested that this item be deferred indefinitely, so I will officially, is that okay, Dave, or am I still going?
Madam President, Commissioners, yeah, I think you just have to close the hearing and then defer the item indefinitely. That's staff recommendation, so.
Perfect. So I will close the public hearing, and with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Go ahead. Sure, why not? I would move that we defer this matter, number 3, indefinitely.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So the fourth item is resolution number 2397, vacation of public right-of-way for a portion of West Franklin Street and a portion of West Washington Street adjacent to the Boise High School. A request for adoption. So this is an open hearing or open public hearing, so I'm going to go ahead and open that.
Thank you, Madam
Welcome.
President.
Hi, Christy.
Christy Little, Development Services Manager. I'm going to read through our formal legal description and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of this. So this action is to consider the vacation of public right-of-way for a portion of West Franklin Street and a portion of West Washington Street adjacent to blocks 72, 77, and 80 of the Boise City original town site as shown on the official plat filed in Book 1, Page 1, Ada County Records, located in south one half of Section 3, Township 3 North, Range 2 East, Boise Meridian, City of Boise, Ada County, containing 0.401 acres, 17,475 square feet, more or less. So here we are at Boise High School in the north end. The area proposed for vacation is hatched in red. There is Area A along Franklin Street and Area B along Washington Street. As I was preparing this presentation, it occurred to me that not all of the commissioners are familiar with our interagency waiver of fee agreements. And so I do just kind of want to take a step back and cover those with you. State statute allows us to enter into waiver of fee agreements with other taxing entities within the state. The Boise School District was actually the very first agency that we entered into this process with back in 2011. I worked then, and at that time, as we created that first agreement, we looked at the needs of the highway district and the needs of the school district. So specific to the school district, our needs are, there were at that time some properties where we needed right-of-way for some projects, and the school district dedicated those rights-of-way to us at no cost. On the flip side, as the school has added on to facilities and constructed new facilities, we've waived impact fees, permit review fees, and plan review fees. We do have these agreements in place with all of the land use agencies in Ada County, the West Ada School District, the CUNA School District, and they were all, well, as I said, Boise School District was the first one that was approved, and it has lapsed. So all of those were written with a 10-year expiration stop before that. So it is in my court to get all of these agreements back up to speed. We've been following along as we have been, but I wanted to let you know that this agreement has expired. We were already working to just present to you an amendment to continue it for another 10 years. So here's the more specific legal description. The school district did do an appraisal. It did come out to $525,000. The appraisal was conducted based on our standards and how we require appraisals to be done. And it was based on commercial property values in the downtown area. So while it was prepared in accordance with our policies, our staff finds that this parcel is actually very difficult to properly value because of its public use as a public school. And so so although it was appraised correctly, our staff doesn't necessarily agree with the value in this instance because of the specific use. So here's how things look out there today. So the top picture is Washington Street. As you can see, the track already extends into the right-of-way. The right-of-way goes, or shall I say, the right-of-way goes a couple of feet past the fence as it exists today. In the bottom picture on Franklin Street, there is some off-street parking. Behind that red car, there's a driveway. That off-street parking is used not only for students, but also for track and field events and tennis events, and that is in the ACHD right-of-way. Behind that fence, you can see porta potties and stands for fans, and that area is also in our right-of-way. Between the track and Boise High School is the 11th Street pathway. So in 2021, the school district partnered with ACHD and the city of Boise to facilitate the construction of the pathway through the Boise High School site, which connects Franklin to Washington through the property. The school district did not dedicate right-of-way or an easement for this pathway, but instead entered into a 35-year agreement with ACHD and the city of Boise that the pathway can remain and it will be reevaluated in 35 years. The reason for that was, as you know, there's really no opportunity for Boise High to grow in any direction. And if at some point in the future there was an expansion needed, it would probably happen to the west. And the track facility would have to be fully relocated anyway. So the school district, though, did enter into this agreement. The approximate square footage of the pathway, length and width, is 4,000 square feet. The agreement states that it will be open to the public and that Boise School District is responsible for the day-to-day maintenance. So that's including power to the lights that are lighting the pathway, snow removal, ice removal, leaves, and any signage, pavement markings, all of that. The school district and ACHD could have probably at that time talked about how this fits into that interagency agreement that we have, but it really was more of a three-party agreement with the city of Boise. So here is the rendering for the new track. The applicant is requesting the vacations so that the track can be expanded to meet current high school standards, so from 6 lanes to 8 lanes, as you can see, and lots of other track and field associated improvements. So it does move the track to the east, closer to the school. As you can see here, the on-site parking that was on Franklin is now, that's removed. So they're removing the tennis courts on the west end, creating their own parking lot on their own property. There will still be on-street parking on Franklin and on Washington. As part of this project, the school district has agreed to work with us. Our district engineer has identified we've kind of got a drainage capacity issue in this part of the north end, and the school district has agreed to reconstruct curbs and gutters to bring those improvements up to current standards, including correcting ADA deficiencies. And so we have asked that they install permeable pavers in the parking areas on Franklin and Washington to help us with those drainage issues, and they've agreed to do that. Our staffs have also discussed offsetting the cost of this vacation with those costs of design and construction of those permeable pavers, which is estimated at about $250,000 for what we're asking for. In your memo, I provided you several different alternatives. Approve the vacation, and then I listed some alternatives or deny the vacation. Staff's recommendation is that we approve the vacation at no cost to the Boise School District. When you look at the ledger of improvements, if we start at $525,000 and reduce that by the offset of the improvements and permeable pavers of $250,000, if we were to put a value to the land that has been provided for the 11th Street pathway and use the same appraisal dollar, that brings it down another $120,000. Hard to put a number on the cost to maintain that pathway, but I do believe that's significant. And that kind of gets us below that $100,000, which I recognize we no longer have a interagency agreement that's valid. But staff's recommendation is that this vacation be approved with no dollars exchanged, and that the commission require an agreement to be signed by both parties that outlines the facts and findings of this. And then additionally, we will be back to you with the updated and amended interagency waiver fee agreement. Tom Willis is the Facilities and Operations Director with the Boise School District. He's who our staff works with on all of these projects, and he's here to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Christy. Commission, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gold?
Yeah, just, would this change the width of the sidewalk on Washington and Franklin?
Madam President, Commissioner Gold, it won't change the width of the sidewalk.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay.
Is there further?
Yeah, any other further questions?
No.
Okay, if not, any public comments?
We do not have anybody signed up.
Okay, so with that, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners?
Madam President, I would move to approve the vacation of the property on West Franklin, West Washington Streets between 11th and 13th Street at no cost to the Boise Independent School District, and with findings that outline the findings and facts described by the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Let me, if I may, Madam President, and this is sort of, I'm not even sure what my question is exactly, but maybe it's a question for Christy about the, basically the situation is we're giving property to them, and ordinarily when we vacate property, the recipient pays for it. And of course, here we're dealing with another public agency, public entity. And so we've had in the past an agreement in which we do these exchanges without cost. That agreement doesn't exist now. So we're saying, let's go ahead and do it without cost anyway, and we'll fix up the existence of the agreement later. And it sounds like the consensus is that a no cost, given the improvements that they're building and other factors, when it all boils down, our actual cost is probably something on the order of less than $100,000. Does that kind of boil it all down?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, that's exactly right. The commission does at their discretion for any vacation can determine what the actual value is, and can waive some or all depending on findings, with or without an interagency waiver fee agreement. So that's why specifically the staff recommendation is that we enter into an agreement with the Boise School District to document these findings, which would include the reasons for the offset of cost.
So I guess maybe the only question I have is, does this sort of situation, how often does it arise that we are giving property to them versus them doing something for us? Is it the kind of situation where it's more or less reciprocal, or is it more often one side or the other receiving a benefit versus providing a benefit? You know what I mean? Because if we have a situation where there are two public agencies that should cooperate together, but the one has more frequent needs than the other, that's something that ought to be taken into consideration. Can you give us any sense on that?
I can. Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, as I mentioned, the Boise School District in particular was the first agency that we entered into this agreement with. At that time, we actually our staff sat down together, and we went through our integrated 5-year work plan, and we went through our CIP, and we went through their CIP, and we looked at every single school site where we might need right-of-way, and they dedicated it to us with that very first go-around. Since then...
When was that?
That was in 2011.
Okay.
So we worked on that quite extensively in 2010 and 2011. So since then, we haven't really had a need for any right-of-way from them, because really we kind of got that right off the bat, which was the only agency we've been able to do that with. So as I mentioned, we've waived impact fees for schools and plan review fee and permit fees for work in our right-of-way to construct those schools. For other agencies, though, I would say it's probably more that we're the one waiving fees more than others, simply because it just really depends on where the projects are and what we need. But as a current example, as we submit development applications and permit applications to the City of Meridian and the City of Boise for our Franklin site and our Apple site and our Ustick site, all of those fees should be waived for us, so that we won't be paying those fees. We shouldn't be paying impact fees when we get ready to build those facilities. For what we do, flip side for them, if they're building new facilities, we're waiving our impact fees. We're waiving permit fees for their utility extensions. So I would say, overall, if you were to put the ledgers together, the other agencies probably are getting more bang for the buck, but at the end of the day, it's all taxpayer money in Ada County, which is why the commission focused on these agreements.
Okay, so it sounds like then, with respect to the school district, if we kind of add it all up, and considering those right-of-way dedications that came about initially, sounds like then at this point, perhaps at the very least, we haven't given them more than they've given us so far at this point. Is that
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I would say of all of the agencies, this one's probably the closest.
Okay, all right. Well, that makes sense. And I think it's worth considering that, and naturally we want to cooperate with all these other agencies, and so I appreciate that information. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Okay, if there's no other...
Madam President, I just want to say I really, really appreciate the school district's participation in the 11th Street Bikeway. That agreement would tremendously benefited the function of a bikeway that goes all the way from the foothills to the river when it's all done. The other is I really appreciate, because we do stormwater, and stormwater is so important. We heard about that last week, that they, without batting an eye, apparently just said, yeah, we'll put in green stormwater permeable pavers into the parking lot. That is huge, and the more we can do that, the more we can address some of the stormwater challenges of the old stormwater system that was put in, when those neighborhoods were built. So I really appreciate, in terms of opportunity costs for both of those, that the school district's bearing those costs. I think this more than justifies moving forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay. Next item is public communications. Does any member of the public wish to address the commission?
So Miss Sally Reynolds signed up, but I don't believe that she is here anymore.
Madam President, Commissioners, I was able to talk with this young lady before and answered her questions, so she's not going to be testifying during this period.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
And I'll be working with her to get the answers she needs.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, Stacy?
Nope,
Okay. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned. We will now meet in a work session to hear an update on the 2024-2028 Integrated 5-Year Work Plan Public Comment Review. And just as a reminder, Commissioner Gold and I have to head out at 1:45. Miss Margaret.
All right. Madam President, members of the Commission, for the record, Margaret Zealous, Senior Transportation Planner here at the Highway District. This will be an informational briefing on the results of the 24-28 Integrated 5-Year Work Plan public outreach effort that was conducted earlier this year. Today, we're going to walk through a high-level review of the public project requests and then take a deeper dive into each jurisdiction's areas. And finally, Commission, we will cover the next steps in our 24-28 5-year work plan. I'd like to start off this work session with just a reminder of where we're at in developing the plan. We are still in the very early stages where staff is working on collecting information from the public, our ACHD partner agencies, and from you, our Commission. These early stages help staff create a foundation of requests, priorities, and directions for our prioritization methodology and programming to build off of. As a brief reminder, ACHD conducted a 7-week-long public outreach period that ran from mid-November until early January. Staff utilized an entirely new platform which featured an online interactive map and survey alongside social media outreach, poster distribution, and reminders to our advisory committees and neighborhood planning groups. In total, Commission, we received 1,350 comments, approximately 13 times as many comments as we have received in previous years. And these numbers can't paint the entire picture alone. For example, over 50 of these requests overlap between city jurisdictions. 285 of these requests are within ITD right-of-way or would require ITD coordination, and 323 of these requests have been previously identified or prioritized by a partner agency. Additionally, when we look at many of the request categories, which include road and intersection, bicycle and pedestrian, street crossing, traffic calming, and other, there are a lot of overlaps as well. Staff knows that many of the public comments expanded beyond that PIN category alone. For example, a road and intersection PIN might also include comments that request an enhanced pedestrian crossing. 55% of the comments are within Boise or their area of impact. These numbers jump down to 15% in Eagle, 14% in Meridian, 8% in Star, 5% in Garden City, and 3% in Kuna. As we look to the road project request categories, we had 493 road and intersection requests, which make up 37% of the total. Continuing down, there were 435 bicycle and pedestrian requests, 181 street crossing requests, 154 traffic calming, and 85 other category requests. And the other category, just to fill that in a little bit, our survey option did allow for the public to put other, in which a lot of them tended to be general comments or comments about broader areas. So as you're looking at the list that you have, some of those other categories might expand beyond a single project location. Finally, Commission, there are 64 members of our community that are subscribed to this page. Staff is encouraged by this participation and is confident that we continue to learn from this platform and utilize it moving forward. Now that we've covered the larger picture, we'll move into an overview of our high comment areas within the county and cities in alphabetical order. Each slide will include a comment graph that's organized by the category type, so you can see the total number of comments and then see how those were distributed by category. Additionally, we'll have a small public quote. We will have a list of the high comment areas organized by what is currently programmed and what items might need some additional consideration. Some of the areas will also have requests organized by the neighborhood planning area. And finally, to conserve time, I will be calling out highlights from each area and not going through every single project. So beginning with Ada County, we had 405 comments, with 189 of those being road and intersection requests. Of those 405, 24% were within Eagles neighborhood planning area, 23% were within Stars, and 11% were within the Southwest Boise planning area. And let me stop right there. We are talking about Ada County unincorporated. So some of these are going to have overlap between jurisdictions. And you're going to see some of these projects come up again as we get to the specific cities. Just high comment areas, we had the Orchard Street realignment. We had Star Road between Chinden and State, which brought in 30 public comments. And then additional consideration section, we had the State Highway 55 and Beacon Light Road, which received 31 comments, primarily requesting bicycle and pedestrian enhancements and an enhanced pedestrian crossing. Commission staff has added this to our fiscal year 23 scoping effort and is doing ongoing coordination with ITD regarding this intersection. Moving on to Boise, before I dive in too deep, Boise will be 2 slides so that we are able to cover all of the information well. For Boise, we received 775 total comments, with 298 of those being bicycle and pedestrian requests. Beginning with our programs, our highest comment areas are Northview Street between Cole and Curtis, Capitol Boulevard from Vista to the Greenbelt, Amity Road and Holcomb Road, that intersection, Emerald Street between Camelot and Raymond, and Victory Road and Canaro Way. Additionally, Commission, another high comment area was the Alpine Street and Latah Street intersection, which received 26 requests. Staff is pleased to share that as part of an accelerated effort by TTS, our ACHD team is out at this intersection working on it as we speak. Continuing with Boise, I'm going to cover the requests by the neighborhood planning area and then move into the projects that are not currently programmed and need some additional considerations. Referenced on the far right of your screen, we have requests in the central bench, which made up 24% of Boise's comments, and the next closest being 20% in North Boise and 16% in Southeast Boise.
Margaret, can I just say 24% in the central bench? Like, that just makes my heart sing, and I know that that's a culmination of so much work on behalf of a lot of folks here, those online, and the commission. So that's like a monumental number that I just am so thankful for. So yes, exclamation point on that one.
Continuing on with our high comment areas, we have the 9th and Myrtle intersection, and that intersection has been shared with our ACHD traffic and ITD. Primarily the requests were regarding the pedestrian crossing improvements and that movement that already exists there. Next, we have 15th Street and Americana Boulevard between Shoreline to Front Street. We received 24 comments for this. Staff has added this to our fiscal year 23 scoping effort. Moving on, we have the Amity Road, Federal Way to Holcomb, Orchard Street between Franklin and Fairview, and that is a few segments, but there were comments all along that corridor. Some were general comments regarding the entire stretch. Moving on, we had the Eckert Road and Boise Avenue intersection, Bogus Basin Road between Hill and Curling, and finally Victory Road and Apple Street, which staff has added to our fiscal year 23 scoping effort. Continuing on to Eagle. We have 215 comments within Eagle, with 88 of those being road and intersection requests. Beginning with our programs, we have Floating Feather Road and Park Lane as one of our higher comment areas, and the Horseshoe Bend Road and Floating Feather Road intersection. And then comment areas that will require some additional consideration. We're back to that State Highway 55 and Beacon Light Road, and that's where you're really seeing the overlap between our jurisdictions. And as you look through your own comment packets, there is a lot of overlap, and we did try to indicate that as well as possible. And all of these requests that have overlap have been shared with all of the partner agencies who have a stake in that. Continuing down, we have the State Street between 2nd to Styerman. This has been added to the fiscal year 23 scoping efforts. And another comment is some of these jurisdictions, we do have some ITD comments. And so a high popular non-ACHD facility that was commented on within Eagle was Eagle Road between Shannon and State. And I'm still working on analyzing and gathering that data for ITD, but it will be shared with them as well. Continuing on to Garden City, we have 64 comments within Garden City, with the majority actually being split between bicycle and pedestrian and road and intersection requests. Beginning with our programmed, we have the Adams Street and 43rd Street and Northview Street and Curtis Road. The Northview Street and Curtis Road is included in the concept study in fiscal year 24. Continuing on to our future considerations, we have the State Street and Arnie Lane that will be shared with ITD, Marigold Street between Garrett and the Greenbelt, which will be a concept study, and Adams Street, 44th to Veterans Memorial Parkway. Another high comment area within Garden City was Glenwood between Shandon and State. City of Kuna, we have 38 comments, with 24 of those being road and intersection requests. Our currently programmed is the Avalon Street and Swan Falls Road to 2nd Street. A high comment area within that also included the Avalon Street and Orchard Street crossing, a pedestrian crossing there. And additional considerations of projects include the Avalon Street and Swan Falls Road intersection, Deer Flat Road between K Street and State Highway 69, and Luker Road and Stagecoach Way. Next, we have Meridian. We have 201 comments in Meridian, with 126 of them being road and intersection requests. Draw your attention to the bottom left of the screen. We had 62% of the comments in North Meridian, 34% in South Meridian, and 4% in downtown Meridian. Continuing with our programs, the highest comment area with 29 requests in Meridian was Linder Road between Overland Road and Franklin. That is your I-84 overpass. Next, we have Locust Grove between Eustic and McMillan, Locust Grove and Wrightwood intersection, and Linder Road between Pine Avenue and Eustic Road, which will be a concept study coming up. In the future considerations requests, we have the McMillan Road between 10 Mile and Linder, and Eustic Road and Venable Avenue, which staff has added to our fiscal year 23 scoping efforts. And finally, we have 105 comments for Star, with 72 of them being road and intersection requests. Our programmed requests are Star Road between Shannon and State. We have a community programs project that will add pedestrian facilities north of the river. Additionally, in our future consideration section, we have Floating Feather Road and Star Road. Staff has added this to our fiscal year 23 scoping efforts. We have Plummer Road, State to Floating Feather. Staff has also added this to our 23 efforts. And a non-ACHD facility that received quite a few comments were State Highway 16 and State Street between Canada and Plummer Road. So we have some upcoming deadlines, Commission. Our partner agencies have already started submitting their priority requests, but those were all due today. Additionally, we started receiving some formal requests, but the formal requests from our advisory committees and our neighborhood planning groups are also due today. And all of this great information, Commission, is to help you to provide your project priorities by March 30th. As we continue on, and I've highlighted some of the items that we've added to our scoping list already, but as staff continues to identify projects, this is a really great way for us to help see the need throughout Ada County and figure out what needs to be scoped. And scoping is one of the first steps in programming for the integrated 5-year plan. So we're happy to see some of those translate into our scoping effort. Additionally, requests are also being shared with our ACHD traffic and maintenance departments as well. You're going to notice within your packets that some of them are maybe pothole based or more maintenance focused. And so it's really great that we are able to share that internally as well. And as we continue to develop the 24-28 integrated 5-year work plan, staff is continuing to analyze the public outreach data we've received and working with our partner agencies to help us learn and improve upon this process. This was an entirely new platform, and there is lots of room for us to learn more about the system and how we can collect data and support our partner agencies. Finally, after we've reviewed all of our priority lists, staff will begin our industry-leading prioritization process. Finally, ACHD staff will be, Commission, staff will be back in front of the Commission on March 15th to review the comments from our partner agency prioritization requests. Say that 4 times. Finally, Commission, staff looks forward to receiving your project priorities by March 30th, at which point you will have all of the public comments that we've received and all of the priority lists that we've received as well while you construct your own priorities. Thank you, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Margaret. Great presentation. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
You say only 1,300 submissions. I think you guys ought to up your game. Just kidding. I remember what it was like 2014 and 15, and yeah, just a small fraction of that. So thank you very much. That's all I have to say. I know, are we going to be meeting again with the commission after the 30th of March so we can discuss what actual priorities and maybe new scoping efforts and things like that will happen?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, ACHD, we do have a commission work session scheduled for April. I would need to confirm that date with Christy. And it's an integrated 5-year work plan check-in, so we can shape that to whatever the commission needs us to discuss.
Thank you for reinforcing our deadline for March 30th. I appreciate that. Please meet with staff if you have questions. Yeah, please get those into our team as soon as possible. Great job, Mark. Great job. This is really exciting. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Is it okay if some of these individual and partner priorities become our priorities as well? Does that help stack up? Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. And with that, we're done for today. We'll see you next week.